Time to get started. This is really not bad. It's very simple. Start by going to bubble.io. It'll take you here, and you click on the Get Started button right here. Very simple. Get started and create an account. Once you create an account, it's going to look like this. You're going to be in this apps section. This is where you're creating your apps. The websites you're creating are called apps, so just get used to that terminology. So click on this button, create an app. And you just got to name it whatever you want, Brenton Test. This doesn't matter, and it'll show you what the URL is going to look like. Don't think about it. This is just a test. None of this is something that we're going to use. We're going to throw this away. You're just using this to learn, okay? So don't think too hard about any of this stuff. And if you want to go through this little wizard, step 1 through 4, you can, but let's just skip it for now and skip this as well. Just skip all this stuff, because we're just going to get right into it, okay? This is the editor. This section on the right, this is where you build the web page and the web app. And this section on the left is all of the information. Now, there's a lot here, and it's overwhelming. So, at first, you're just going to focus on this kind of column right here, this scrolling. You don't have to worry about all these right away. Right here, let's just start at the top with text. This is the simplest possible thing we could do. Click and drag and write in this little box, hello world. Now you're going to be tempted maybe to type directly into this, but you can't. You need to actually, whenever you're making a change to one of the elements, you make the change through the little menu that pops up. So we're going to type here, hello world. And now I can close this and see that I've made my change. So this is the editor. Now we want to see what it looks like in the real world. So we're going to click this button. This is a preview. So you click on this and it'll open a new tab that'll show you what your website will actually look like, not in the editor. And you see it says hello world. Now I'm going to go over a number of things really quick to get you started. First off, this positioning where it's just being placed wherever you put it, this is called absolute positioning. This is not a good way to build a real website. This is fine for when you're learning, but a real website needs to have a better layout. And the way you can do that is by finding it in the elements tree. In fact, if I right click on this and go all the way down here where it says reveal an elements tree, it should show me my text box in the elements tree. Another way you could do that is if you click on it and then scroll down to the bottom of the appearance tab, you'll see reveal an elements tree. And when you click on that, it highlights it right here. So you can see that this element, hello world, is inside of this element, which is the entire page. So we want to change the layout of this page to not be this fixed position. So let's click on that page here in the elements tree and go to the layout tab in the menu. And there you see its container layout is fixed. A good default is column. For almost everything, your layout should be column, except in times when you want to deviate from that to row, when you want things to be next to each other side to side. But kind of like your default should be column. I actually wrote an email to Bubble and asked them to please change their default container layout from fixed to column. But I don't think they're going to do it because it's just so easy to drag something onto the screen and have it land wherever you drop it. But now, if we drag a new thing, it'll only go into the column. So you see, I'm going to drag several items. There we go. That's what column looks like. And this is how you edit. This is how you build a web page. So I've just put a bunch of useless buttons. Let's click preview again and see this refresh. There we go. So I want to point out a couple more things before I send you to the next lesson. So this design tab right here, there's several, design, workflow, data. We're looking at the design tab right now. This is how you set up the layout, which items are on the page and where they're positioned. One of the most important things in this layout to lay things out is obviously the elements themselves, but you can collapse that. You can collapse the visual elements and you can look at containers. And this is very valuable. You can put these groups in here. And I'm going to actually use the element tree, see my group A. I'm going to put these buttons in the group. See how I'm clicking and dragging into the group. And what's happening with this group? They all stacked on top of each other. So let's click on the group and go to layout and take a look. They're fixed. So again, we're going to make this column to see. But in this case, I want it to be a row, and I want this group to be all the way full width. So right now it's a fixed width of 280 pixels. Again, I'm looking at this group. I'm looking at the menu for the group, the layout. I scrolled down. I don't want this to be fixed width, so I'm unchecking that. And now I'm going to set this to 0. So it's as wide as it needs to be. You see that? So when we preview, we'll see some of these buttons pop out. So this is how we control layouts. And again, this has got a fixed height. I'm going to delete that. So this is one of the most common things you'll do in this is messing with the containing groups and changing the layouts of them when you're in this design tab. Group, and then there's forms and many other things. Now, what if we want to do something interactive, something interesting? That's where workflows happen. So let's say, for example, let's delete this. I just click on it and click the delete key. Let's say, for example, that we want this to be hidden. There we go. That text, we're going to hide it. So we're going to call this one hide that thing. Now what I want to happen is when I click on this button, I want that text to disappear. Now this is called interaction, and that's where you use the next tab, workflows. And you can just go straight to this workflow tab and click on a button or click on this and create a workflow from scratch. But most of the time your workflows are going to be triggered by an action like the user clicking on the button. So instead of creating your workflows directly in here, usually you'll be in the design tab, you'll click on the item that's going to trigger the action, and you're going to find this in the menu, start edit workflow. So when I click on that button, click this, it's going to start and edit a workflow. So here it made a workflow for me, and it says when button, the button that's named hide that thing, is clicked. And it even, if you hover over it, it gives you a little preview of which button it is. And now it shows this little menu of what the actions will be. Now here we're going to create an action. You click on this. There's a lot to learn in all of here. Here's all the possible things you can do. A lot of what you're going to do is going to be in the data as you're modifying data. The other place that you'll see a lot of actions is in this element actions, which is when you're changing something on the page. So this is changing database stuff. This is changing the way the website itself looks. All the other things are fairly specific to other things. So I happen to know that under elements, I can click hide. Now watch this though. You can also just, in this little area, look for what you want. Hide an element. And it selects it for me, brings up the menu. Which element do I want to hide? The one that was called hide me. So there's different options here. There's the group A, there's the texts, and there's the buttons. And if you hover over it, it even shows it to you. So I'm going to hide it when you click that button. Okay, now go back to design tab, and you can see that everything still looks the same, but when we click preview, there's now a workflow in place. So nothing changed visually, but now there's a workflow. So when we click these, nothing happens, but when I click this one, it hit it. Cool. Now let's make a new button that shows it. Do you know what to click next? Start edit workflow. Create a new workflow. What should we do? Should we go in here and find it manually, or should we just do search for show? Which element? Hide me. And we'll click preview to see how it works. Hide that thing, show that thing. Look at that. So this is the basics of generating user interfaces. Now data. There's data types, or if you're familiar with backend traditional code, this would be like a table, like a database table. And there's already one table in here, or one data type called user. Let's make a new one called test and create it. Now I've made a new one called test. I'm going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see there's some default fields: creator, modified date, created date, and slug. Slug is if you ever need to display the name of this, if you ever need to display an item from this type in the URL, like a link. But it all automatically keeps track of when it was created and who created it. Let's make a new field called, I don't know, my favorite number. We'll call it number. Now I'll make another one called my favorite color. The type of this is text. So you can't put text in the number field because it'll only accept a number, and you can put anything in the text field. So that's why I set this one's type to be number and this one's type to be text. Okay, I've created this data type. This is a database. So how do we now edit it? Well, let's put an input, drag that in there, and we're going to call this input A. We're going to call this input favorite number. And we're going to make one change to it, which is I'm going to set the content format from text. I'm going to change it to integer or number. Integer just means number. I guess, do they also have number in here? They don't. It's integer. Integer means number. Okay. And I'm going to pull this out to be next to it and say save my favorite. Cool. I'm going to click preview. What we want to happen now is we want this button to take whatever I type in here and save it into the database. Now I'll show you the database. This is where we create the entire data types or the data table. But if you look over here, there's some other tabs. This is the next most important one, app data. This shows us the actual information. And this is when I say table, this is the table. So you see the tests that I created, that's the data type. And here's the fields that I created. And in traditional computer science, these are called columns. And you can see why, because this is a column that all of the items in this table or in this data type have an item on that column. They also have created date, modified date, etc. And it's empty right now. There's 0 items in my tests type. So when I click this, I want to take this information, this number, and I want to store it in here, right there. So let's quickly build something that'll do that. I clicked on this button, start a workflow. This time we're going to make changes, or actually we're going to create a thing. What type of thing? We're going to make something in that database table that I made, test. That's what it's called. And what are we going to change? Number or color? Do you remember? This is number. And where are we going to get it from? We're going to get it from the input. So if we scroll down, we can find that input favorite number. And we're going to get the value of that, whatever the value happens to be, which means whatever I typed. So this will create a new thing. And I think we're done. So if I go back here and refresh, I'll type 454, click save, and then we're going to go back real quick to my database and watch. It pops up, 454. And we can also add favorite color the same way. So these are the 3 most important: design, workflow, and data. Design is the front end. This is what you see on the website. Workflow is actions, and data is the data that is used to build your website. So you need all 3 of these. Styles, plugins, settings, and logs you can ignore for now. We're not going to use them right away. But this is the basis of all of Bubble. Remember that you can drag these around. I also want to show you that you can change what page you're on by clicking on this. So we have index right now, but in the future you could add a new page. My new page, like that. Cancel that. And then preview is obviously very important. And this is undo. So if I accidentally make a mistake, like let's say I go, oops, delete, oops, delete, oops, delete. I didn't mean to delete those. I can click this undo button and it'll let me undo it. Last thing to note is when you see an issue show up right here, this is not something, it's a little warning symbol. This is like the check engine light on your car. When you see this, stop what you're doing and fix the issue. Because if you let these issues build up, your app will become unusable. How do you fix the issue? You click on that and it gives you a little warning here. And what's really great about it is it'll tell you what the problem is. If you click on the problem, it'll actually take you right to the problem. So saying create a new test, value should be a number, but right now it is an element. And this is because remember I did that undo? I undid that last step. So this should be inputs favorite numbers value. So right now, this is the element itself, the input favorite number. But this needs to actually have the type, needs to be given a number, not an element. And so when I click that forward button, it should go back to the way it was. So it's not the element, but it's the element's value. This, by the way, this blue part is called an expression. You use expressions in Bubble a lot. These expressions, you build them one thing at a time. And you click on it and you can either edit it or you can click on more to add the next part of the expression. So you build these expressions and they turn into sort of like English readable sentences. That's all I want to show you for now. There's a lot more learning, so don't be overwhelmed. You're going to have a chance to go back and relearn all of this, but that's just the first glance look at Bubble.